You're listening to the Business and Life Conversations podcast with Angela Henderson, episode 15. Hey there, you're listening to the Business and Life Conversations podcast. My name is Angela Henderson, and on this show, we talk about improving your business, life, or both by having amazing and rich conversations with brilliant guests who will inspire you and who will give you tips and tricks to help you grow both in life and in business. Now, we first met at Tash Corbin's conference last year in Australia, and I loved your message about productivity as a whole, but more importantly, how you look at productivity slightly different to mainstream productivity, and that you don't have to work harder to be productive. But before we jump into your beautiful productivity ninja moves, I'd love for you to let the audience know a little bit about you starting with your wonderful life as a traveling nomad entrepreneur for the last few years, where you are now, and what your core business is all about.
Cool. Yeah, absolutely. Well, it is. I mean, this is why I get really excited about productivity, because it isn't just about like, here's the tool, that productivity app, go and go and do more. There's so many layers to it. But yeah, so for me, when I started my business, I knew that I wanted to be able to travel the world with my business. I wanted to be able to run it from anywhere. So I was always aware, like, freedom was like a really big goal for me, or a really big value for me. And this is interestingly how I've got really excited about productivity, because the one thing I did learn, I'm kind of going off on a tangent already, but
I love tangents.
That freedom comes through discipline. And so I really resisted that. So I spent the last just over 3 years living out of my suitcase, traveling all over the world. And when I first started, I was like, great, I've got all this freedom, I can work whenever I want. Didn't have any structure because I didn't want structure. I didn't want to be tied to stuff like that. And so I then realized that I'd kind of like got all this amazing time freedom, but I didn't have money freedom. I wasn't like in that right place. And so I really learned through trial and error that actually productivity is the vehicle that's going to get me to where I want to be, to have the lifestyle, the business and the life. So that's kind of like what I want from my clients, is that they have the business and the life. And so so I spent the last 3 years traveling, and then, it's been a bit of a big year for me this year. I decided that I was really kind of craving a base. And so I have just relocated to Spain. I've literally bought an apartment in Malaga, and I've moved in for a couple of months. So it's almost like readdressing all of the way that I go about things and my habits. Like, productivity is really about habits. And so I'm, really looking at that, like, what do I want my day to look like again? So constantly reassessing it like that.
And right now, and again, I'm assuming it's just been like, again, that transition period, because you've been used to living out a suitcase. So in some ways, you've probably had to grieve the loss of not having that suitcase, and potentially go to kind of going, okay, settling down, potentially a slower way of life even. Yeah. Would you agree?
It has been such an interesting transition. Like, I definitely did not expect it. Like, just how I've lived my life the last few years, like, I have no problem with change. Like, I'm constantly, like, it's a big part of my life. But this came with so much other stuff, like, around, what does that mean? Like, if you're in one place. And so it's been really fascinating to watch the thoughts and really what was coming up for me, and kind of like just allowing it to happen, because I knew it was like it was a bit of a process of like really shifting almost your identity, like, it's like, I'm a productivity coach, I travel the world, and then suddenly it's like, I've got a base. What does that mean? And it's been a really interesting transition, not actually that comfortable at all. But it's good to come out the other side and be like, okay, I'm ready again.
I'm ready to rock and roll.
Yeah.
And so tell us a little bit about, what does Jo Bendle do? What does productivity coach mean to you, so that the listeners have a better understanding?
Yeah, so basically I generally help women entrepreneurs to get out of overwhelm. And we do this through some really simple productivity tools and systems, so that they can create their version of freedom. But it's when we talk about like why it's different, is that it doesn't matter how many productivity tools I give you or which planner you use, that is not going to make the difference. That's not the thing that will make you productive, because there are so many layers to getting your productivity on. And it's super confronting, because what I'm asking you to do is like really look at, hang on, am I showing up for my core desires? Probably not, because we've got fear. So there's two sides to it. So how I work is, yes, we definitely need the masculine sort of productivity tools, like the structure, the simple steps. We want to create some really sort of success habits, but also we have to look at the feminine mindset side, because we've got these productivity blocks, you know, like there's things that are stopping us. So that's really what the difference is. It's like bringing in both, because no matter how many, I mean, like most people have tried to get productive before, and then they fall off the wagon. It's because they haven't looked at the mindset side of like, hang on, what's the fear? What am I afraid of? You know, that stuff, which is why I get really excited about it, because it can be such a game-changing kind of process.
And do you feel like over the years being a productivity coach, are you seeing businesses being more productive or less productive because of the thought, you know, around everywhere I go, we must hustle, we must do this, you know, what have you seen?
Yeah, I do. It's interesting. I'm not a big fan of the hustle approach, because ultimately my passion is that we have that business and the life. But there's that whole mentality now, is that you can do anything. We can do absolutely anything, but it doesn't mean that we can do everything, not at the same time. And what people are trying to do is everything all at once, because we can. Mm-hmm. And because, you know, like that whole world that we live in with the social media is just like, we're constantly comparing ourselves to other people, and it's not a fun place to be, and it's not ever going to lead to feeling fulfilled. Mm-hmm. And I think this is the thing about, for me, with productivity and the hustle, is that, most of us have probably focused on being busy. We've got loads done. We've achieved some stuff. And then realised, actually, I'm not really that happy. And so that's what the other side is, that I really want people to tap into, what is it that you really want? Because one, that will make it so much easier to just show up and take the action steps. Because it's aligned to what you really want, but also that's what's going to lead to fulfillment. Like, there's no point as being like hustling, busy, going after the dreams that are other people's goals that we think should be ours. That's never going to work. So I think that it's that, we live in this like information overload now, don't we?
All the time.
Yeah, and it's more about now, like, really constantly encouraging people to like bring it back. Like, what's the one thing that's going to have the biggest impact? And really, that's where it gets confronting. So this is why, you know, it's not about, hey, here's some tools, go and implement them. It's like super confronting process, because we're having to say no to things that actually we want to do. Like, we're generally entrepreneurs, we're like full of ideas.
Yes.
And then being asked to really just like stop and be like, no, you've got to say no to more. I've got to get really honest. Actually, how I'm showing up on a daily basis isn't taking me closer. Like, all that stuff is going on. And which is why it's such a fascinating journey for me to take with my clients. You know?
And I think, you know, like, again, people, I think because they're busy that makes them productive, but it's actually far from the truth, you know, that
absolutely
you can be.
So that's the thing.
Go ahead, sorry. No, you're all right.
Over passionate. So there's no point being busy if you're working on the wrong things. Mm-hmm. And like, so many people are not really, you know, like, we're busy being busy, but we're not heading in the right direction. We're not working on the things that are actually going to have the impact, or you know, like, we're avoiding the things that actually are going to be the income generating things because of maybe fear, or, you know, like, so there's no point keeping ourselves busy. It's not, it's not necessary. Like, this is about creating a life that we love. Mm-hmm. But also, you're just, you could stay on that sort of hamster wheel, but it isn't going to change unless you are really committing to looking at what is it that I truly want and working on the right things. And that, again, is hard.
And I guess that goes nicely into the next question I have is, so what do you think then, and what have you seen are the main, you know, blockages as to why businesses aren't being productive?
Okay, so I talk about things called productivity blocks, and that's basically, things that are stopping us from taking action. So it's all actually, if you peel it all back, it all comes down to fear. So what are we like, generally I'm not good enough, or like all of this stuff that's going on. So the things, how it normally shows up is there'll be self-doubt. It could be self-doubt, so you're kind of like not doing what you should be doing. Procrastination, like we're procrastinating for a reason. So it's like really interesting to look at that. Bright shiny objects, like going off on the next new exciting thing, because staying focused on this one thing is scary, because oh my god, it might be, it might take off. And then obviously just like that whole learning thing, like constantly learning, needing the next qualification, etc. But again, it all comes back, we peel it all back, fear and the I'm not good enough story. So that's kind of like the internal stuff. Like if you're doing any of that, then like inviting you to just stop, maybe hit the journal or go for a walk and ask yourself, like, what am I afraid of? Like, what's going on here? And then the other side to it is like really just like the practical side is like our habits. So there is an amazing quote which I always share all the time. It's like people do not decide their futures, they decide their habits, and their habits decide their futures. So like our habits literally create what we're going to achieve. Like it's up to on a daily basis, have we got the right habits? And so when we start looking at that, most of us probably could say no. So those are the kind of main things that are stopping us being productive.
So then would you say that, so again, like you said, that's what I love about you being a different productivity, is that you're looking at what their fear is really. You're also addressing what type of habits they have, good or bad. And then from that, obviously, you help to supercharge their productivity. So tell me about what are kind of the 5 steps that people can like go into supercharging your productivity. Kind of if they've looked at the fear, they've looked at habits, what other tangible things could they do?
I think that the very first thing that I get people to do is like a big brain dump, and that is massively underrated, right? It's so powerful. So the idea is that we're kind of walking around and got all this stuff in our head, and most people feel overwhelmed because their mental desk needs to be decluttered. So it's really important to like free up some mental space. So the first thing I get everyone to do is do a big brain dump. And like that can be massive. Like if you haven't done that before, or you haven't done it for a long time, you might get pages and pages of stuff. But the idea is that just take yourself somewhere distraction free, and then commit to like clearing the mind so that you can then say, okay, what's really important now. So I would it's as simple as like literally pen and paper, and you go, right, okay, family, right, what's all the stuff that's got to be done in my family, right, the house, what's all the stuff that's got to be done at the house, business, like go through projects, go through every area. I even write down like books that I want to read so that it's out of my head. So my mind can then kind of relax and be like, okay, all of that is taken care of. And this is definitely not turned into a to-do list. It's the main point of this is that it's freeing your mind to be able to see what's a priority now. So that is really powerful.
So the brain dump, like you said, best to do it where there's no distractions, pen and paper. Again, I love a good old pen to paper. I think there's something therapeutic about pen to paper. And then not only just to focus on work, but to work in all key areas of your life. So home, potentially friend, partner, kids, business, and kind of just brain dump.
Everything. Get it all out.
All right. So then they do the brain dump. And then what do you recommend they do? What's the second type of step?
I think that so there's lots of layers for productivity, but if we just go like, right, really basic, if you implement these kind of basic steps, then you can add in more layers. So the next thing I would do is just really super simple, is that each week, just knowing exactly what I want to focus on. So setting a 7-day goal. And it's like we've got 168 hours ahead of us. Like what we choose to do in those hours is what's going to create our future. So simple, super simple. My mind is cleared. I'm like, right, what do I want to have achieved by the time I get to next Friday, let's just say. And okay, like, what impact's that going to have? Right. So always knowing exactly what my priority is on a weekly and a daily basis, literally, it frees up hours and hours of time, but it also really works on the sanity side. Like I feel calm, I feel in control, because I know I haven't got this big sort of 90-day goal that's like, oh my God, how do I start? It's like this week I've got one bite-sized thing I need to achieve. So I don't ever have to think about what should I do now. So yeah, so step 2 is after you've done your brain dump, like maybe you just take a couple of deep breaths and you just ask yourself, like, what do I want to achieve in the next 7 days? What's going to have a big impact on my next steps?
Yeah, I do notice that so many times people are focusing on the future. And I'm all about forward planning or even 90-day planning or I'm all about all that. But I think sometimes we get it's almost like another blockage. We get so worked up, do you know what I mean, about what's coming in the 90 days that we forget to be in the moment and be present. And therefore we stop taking any action whatsoever. And we can actually kind of do like that dance, 1 step forward and 2 steps back. So I'm all about, it's better to have imperfect action than to have no action at all. And I too would prefer you to chunk things down weekly and daily than to worry about, the 120 or the 365 days from now.
Absolutely. And like that's another productivity block, like just being stuck in the planning mode, because it's safe to keep planning out our big goals, but actually taking action on them is that's a really challenging thing, and that's where all the blocks come up. So I really love to get my ladies to like really think big around like what they would love to achieve, so that they've got this great kind of energy, and that's what will keep them showing up. But ultimately that doesn't help you on a daily basis, because you're still like overwhelmed, and overwhelm actually really only exists when we're thinking about the future. So like if we keep coming back to today or the next 7 days, this is the simple thing I need to achieve. It's so funny, Angela, you talk about imperfect action, because that is actually, I often say that is like my biggest productivity tip, because that has had the biggest impact on my own journey. I remember probably 4 years ago that I could see that I was getting in my own way, and I gave myself this, like, it was literally a little post-it note. I had it on my laptop, and every day it's just like imperfect action, better than no action. And I used that to propel me every single day, week, month, and honestly believe that without that I would not be where I am. So it is very powerful, very, very powerful. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess, again, if people, when they're doing that brain dump, are looking at things and patterns even potentially, even with me launching the podcast, I was like, oh my goodness, I don't know how to do this. And what happened if I mess up speaking, or, whatever, if I cough. But I was like, again, that's where it was all fear driven. Again, like the fear, where I was like, you know what, man, if I just go, what's the worst thing that happens? I might get to 100 episodes and I close it down, or I get to 20 episodes. But what's the positives that could come from it being imperfect? Well, I get to reconnect with you from last year. I've connected with someone in Switzerland and all these other cool people. I'm like, oh my goodness, the opportunities, because I allowed myself and gave myself permission to be imperfect, are far greater than, me coughing or spitting on my Diet Coke drink halfway through, you know what I mean, the episode. So agree that action.
And I think that for us as well, it's a lot easier if we start focusing on being of value. Of like when we come back to like being of service, like actually getting this podcast out and helping people is really important. It becomes easier to get out your own way, because it's not about you then. It's about, hang on, these people need to hear this. And yes, that's another sort of really good shift, isn't it, in perspective of like, this is not about me.
And again, I guess, that out there. And I know it's slightly different than productivity, but I guess I still think so many times we all have the same amount of hours in a day. 24 hours. Yeah. Some of us are mothers, some of us are caring for dying partners, our kids, do you know what I mean? We all have our own little things that we're dealing with, regardless of status, of marital status, kid status, whatever. Absolutely. But we still all have choices. And so many people, do you know what I mean? If they're still in that fear blockage, is fear drives them to not take action, So I really like to hone in on that. We all have the same 24 hours in a day. It's up to you what action you decide to take, So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that part of that is as well is that we've all got the same 24 hours, but it's like, like everyone's when you were talking about that, something came into my mind I was going to talk about, and I've totally lost it. It'll probably come back to me. But yeah, again, just like really knowing that what's really important. Like, I know what I was going to say. I was going to say, like, absolutely, life is going to happen. Like, always, life is happening. So when I talk about setting a 7-day goal, it's actually meant to be like a small goal that is achievable, because you want to give yourself like small wins. Like if you have a win every week over 90 days, that is a lot of stuff you've achieved.
Absolutely.
Because life is going to be happening. Like, we still got to do business as usual, life as usual, all the things. So like, this is about allowing yourself to just make progress. Like constantly make small progress, because that is how big things are achieved.
But I also think you touched upon something very important, and especially I find women in business, and that's not that men don't do it, but I think women, because so many of us are wearing so many hats, again, not that men don't, so let me just make that very clear, but because we're juggling so many hats, sometimes I think we also don't celebrate the wins. And I think it's another block that if I do this, then I'm going to jinx myself for this or whatever. And so I think it is important. I'm always in my own, Facebook group, the Australian Business Collaborative, going, okay, guys, winning Wednesday, what did you do? Talk about it. And that, again, allowing yourself to feel good about something you've done, regardless if it's you've made $2 or if you made $1,000. I think it's important to celebrate those wins, which again are kind of which will be a lot more achievable if it's 7-day goals versus 365-day goals, because really then you're only celebrating one time a year versus you get the opportunity to celebrate 52 weeks in a year.
It's so exciting. It's so powerful. Like, so I'm the same. Like in the Wildly Successful Society, which is my membership. Like there are there's so many layers to the celebrating. It's so important, and everybody struggles with it. Even so, we have like what are you proud of posts, but every month when we set our goals, I also ask them to write down what their reward will be.
Yep.
And every single month we have a conversation about it. Like, oh, I didn't reward myself. Like, as women, we're not stopping to celebrate. We're not rewarding our efforts. But going back to the 7-day goal thing is that, yes, you know what? If you could achieve, because I normally get people to set one business goal and one personal goal every week. Now imagine, I was like, even if you don't do that every single week, like let's say you have some holidays, that's still probably 45 things in both areas that you can achieve. Like, it's amazing, like when we just allow this to be easy and allow it to be simple. Don't need it to be complex. And that's the thing with my productivity style, is we don't need complex systems, because actually just these little simple steps and these habits that we create they're game changing,
Yeah, 100%. So if we kind of go back, so we've got brain dump as step number 1. Step 2, set 7-day goals. What's your step 3 for supercharging your productivity?
Okay, so I think like 3 and 4 are almost like joint. They kind of bounce off each other. So starting and ending your day right. So if you start your day really powerfully and you end it powerfully, the middle bit kind of takes care of itself. And so I would start with, right, how do you end your day? So how you end your day is going to have a really big impact with how you start the day tomorrow. So the first thing is that we implement, and something called, it needs a sexier name for sure, but it's called the end of day review. So it's literally 5 minutes, you do an end of day review. And let me just stop that. And all you do is, there you go. So you take 5 minutes and you go, like, you celebrate what did you achieve, like really acknowledging what I did achieve. And then you go, okay, what's the 1 to 3 most important actions that I need to do tomorrow? And you get really clear about it. Have I got everything I need? And this will be the things that are this is about your 7-day goal. Like, what 1 to 3 things, little tasks. So this is not a mini project. This is a small task that needs to happen tomorrow. So end of day review, 5 minutes, like really sort of like closing, but setting yourself up for tomorrow. And then in the morning, ideally, when you start your day, you start with, now I call it a mighty 90, which is basically a 90-minute block of time when you do those most important actions that you've just identified that will ensure that you're working towards your 7-day goal. Now, not everyone can do 90 minutes, so 30 minutes, 45 minutes, whatever you can do to really start that day right. Because again, we start our day right, we end our day right. So those two, and I honestly believe that if you only do those 2 things for the next week or 2, it's going to have a really big impact.
I could agree. I initially heard of the Carrie Wilkinson from the United States calls it the Power Hour, and it was because of her that changed my level of productivity versus working on your business and in your business. And every day for 60 minutes, it's the first thing that I do, regardless. Obviously, well, I take that back. Obviously, get the kids ready; they're off to school, etc.
Yeah.
Then I have my brekkie, those type of things. But in regards to when I get into work, I put those 60 minutes aside. It's not Facebook driven. It's not Instagram driven. It's about what what little things can I work on that will move my business forward? And again, it's been the biggest game changer, not only about creating a new habit, but equally seeing those rewards, because, 60 minutes solid, you can do a lot in 60 minutes.
You can do so much in 60 minutes. Like, it's so powerful. And I think the important part of that is to say that, this is before you've checked emails, your social media is closed down, the phone is off, if it can be. Like, yes. Really set yourself up. Like, it's just 60 minutes. And as I say, if you can't, do 45 minutes. Like, whatever you can do to protect this time and say, look, my 7-day goal is important enough for me to really show up for it. And again, it's so simple, but if you do it like consistently, it is a massive, it will have such an, you will achieve so much.
And I know my one-to-one clients, the ones who have implemented just the 60 minutes, or even some of them do 30 minutes in the morning and 30 minutes at night, just because of the way their life is. Yeah. Their ability to achieve goals much quicker has outpaced those clients who have yet to implement that. But obviously my role as their consultant is to just, plant the seed. Yeah. But yeah, for those ones that have implemented an ongoing, habit forming productivity, absolutely, it's magnificent. So that's like kind of your step 3, step 4. What's your wrap up? What's step 5?
So step 5 is then going back to that inner work. So I talked about earlier around, we need the masculine tools, but we also need that feminine sort of like check-in of like, am I working on the right things and stuff like that. So it's really about, it could be embracing imperfect action. There's a couple of different things I do. One of them is like this inner mentor. So a beautiful exercise is, and I didn't even know this for years and years, I always used to say, when I was like getting in my own way or whatever, I used to say, what would the real Joe do? So I'd be like, the real Joe. So as soon as I say the words, the real Joe, like she's this person who, she's positive and confident, and she doesn't get stuck in self-doubt, and she's got the big bold dreams and she goes after them. And so whenever I say like, what would the real Joe do? It's like, okay, she would sit down, she'd do that 60 minutes and she'd do it now. Or, like things like that. So like when I read the book, Playing Big by Tara Moore, she talked about something called your inner mentor. And so that's when I realized, oh my goodness, this is what the real Joe is. So I use that exercise a lot with my clients now. We really name our inner mentor. Like I've got clients that call, one of my ladies is called Mel, and she's like, her inner mentor is called Millionaire Mel. And it's like, oh, what would Millionaire Mel do? And it's like, yeah, that gets you out of your own way. So yeah, like it's a really great exercise to do like before you start work, like 2 minutes, just like hanging out with your future self. Yeah. How would she show up today? Like what thoughts would she have? What beliefs would she have today? And the other one is like this low vibe stories. It's like we've all got a low vibe story. Oh, I haven't got time is probably a really good one. So it's just like just checking in, what low vibe story have I got today? How would I like to change that? And that again is like just a simple shift. But if we take 2 minutes, once you're in the shower even, of like, what's my low vibe, what's my high vibe story today? Like just shifting it. So like really just like, this is like your first kind of steps. If you do that consistently, do those 5 things consistently, then you can build in more layers. Like we talked about, you can plan further in advance and, be more strategic about what the 7-day goals are. But if we do this consistently, you're going to have a really big impact. You're going to start to get the real wins. You'll be checking in on your mindset. And yeah, I think that's really, really powerful. And this is about, again, like it can be simple to move forwards, take back control.
And like you said, any one of us, even if you just looked at, for example, putting that 90 or 60 minutes aside, that, to kind of recap those really cool 5 steps to supercharge your productivity that you've gone through, about doing a brain dump, looking at your 7-day goals, exploring, ending your day right, starting your day right with a 60 to 90 minute kind of, miracle hour, power hour, whatever you want to call it, and ending it by looking at your inner mentor or your low vibe story. I mean, even again, in that little 60 to 90 minutes, in one of the beginning of the week, you could look at do a brain dump. You could do 7-day goals. Yes. And like, how productive would you be? But would you agree though that productivity will still come down to the 1% of people, or those people that form the correct habits?
Yes, it's all about our habits for sure. Like it is absolutely, and that's, like that sounds like it could be quite easy, and it's not. It's just as easy to implement a bad habit as it is to implement a good habit. But when we become aware, and if you stop and just ask yourself in your end of day review, like, are my habits moving me closer to my desires? Like, it's self-awareness that's going to be changing everything. Like if we keep checking in, like, where am I not, like really showing up? Then that's how you can start to make the changes. So absolutely, it's all about habits. And again, like, a lot of people will not do this because it's super confronting. Mm-hmm. Like, it's just showing us that, oh my God, yeah, I'm not putting my goals up as a priority, and that's really uncomfortable.
Yeah, and they do, and there'll be an excuse, oh, the baby woke up or this got up. And again, I still believe that entrepreneurship collectively is the 1% of people who will go and do this and will take action, even if it's imperfect action, will streamline their business so much faster than the other 99% who are just going to sit there and put it in the corner and say, I'll try it another day.
Yeah, and they've got the excuses, and that's right. It's fine. It's not easy, but actually, it can be easier. Like, you can find a really couple of simple steps that will start shifting things. And when you start to get some little wins, then you'll get them a motivation to keep going. But yeah, I totally agree. It's like, I know we preaching to the converted here, talking to you, but it's like, just be aware. Like, it is uncomfortable. How much do you want this?
Yeah. Absolutely. And, some of these things, it's like, you might not do all 5 of these things, but even if the only thing you did this week is the brain dump, you're still closer, of helping break, those changes and those patterns and those habits to, streamlining or supercharging your productivity, which is the end result, because you want to be able to work more efficiently, more effectively. You don't want to work harder. You want to work smarter. And yet I see so many people struggling because, like you said, they're too busy writing lists, or they're too busy worried about what platform to use or what tech tool to use or whatever, that they're not actually thinking about what type of product they need to develop, or like they're always so worried about the future that, again, they're not sitting in the moment to brain dump and be with themselves and really look at all those things.
Yeah, it's like you said, it's so much safer to just keep being busy, because you don't have to deal with all the confronting stuff. But it's like, that isn't going to lead to fulfillment and make you feel great, and like, this is what we're here for. It's about having this life that supports you. And so it isn't just about getting more done, it's about getting the right stuff done. And that can be, that's step 1. But I totally agree. Like, pick one of them and implement that over the next 7 days and see how it feels.
Yep. No, awesome. Well, it is always a pleasure hearing your beautiful accent, and I'm good to see you. Obviously, the listeners won't get to see you. So before we wrap up, I'd love to know, so they can get to know you a little bit more, what of all the countries in the world is your favorite country, and what's the most delicious dish you've ever had?
Oh my gosh. Do you know what? That is such a difficult question to answer. I love everywhere I go. So I think I'll answer the dish thing. I love Thai food. Okay. So just like a Thai red chicken curry is going to make me super happy.
Uh-huh.
Spicy, I love it.
Spicy or mild?
Yeah. Spicy. Yeah, I love all things Thai food. So that makes me really happy in that country to really enjoy the food. And yeah, as countries go, do you know what? I haven't got a favourite country. At the moment, obviously, I'm really loving the life in Spain because I'm adapted to that, and they've got a really chilled out way of life. Australia, I absolutely love because my bestie lives there, so any excuse to get back is good.
Yes.
And then the other thing that kind of like comes up to me is like Africa. Like, that was the first place that I ever went to as a backpacker, and I was like 20 years old, and like that really stayed with me for many, many reasons. I mean, it's such an interesting continent. But yeah, I don't have a favourite country, but I do love food.
And I think you do love wine off the top of my head.
Oh yeah, I like wine as well, yeah.
I do see a lot of wine images of you and beaches, like your legs and wine and beaches. I'm like, gosh, yeah, I do love her lifestyle. I do love it. So now listen, obviously, what's next for you? And if listeners would like to get to know you a little bit more, where can they find you, hon?
Okay, well, what's next? Really more of the same. Just like more, I think for me, I need to do more in-person offerings now, because being like the nomad has meant that everything has really been online. So I'm feeling really called to do some retreats in my home in Spain, which is exciting.
Super exciting.
Yeah, and also just keep, like the best place for people to really do the work to get started with me is my membership, but I do one-on-one mentoring and masterminds. But I think, well, actually, 2 places. Like you can go into my Facebook page, which is Wildly Successful with Jo Bendle. Website is jobendle.com, and I do actually have. I did do a 5-day challenge, which is all around the 5 habits that we just talked about. So I can send you the link to that if anyone's interested.
Yeah, that'd be awesome, and I can include that in the notes, which, absolutely. So my team and I will also be putting together the whole transcription for this episode at angelahenderson.com.au, and we'll include the link, Jo. And of course, I cover all sorts of related business and life topics inside my Facebook group, the Australian Business Collaborative, of over a few thousand businesses. So make sure you join the community, as I'd love to see you in there. But in the meantime, goodbye from Australia, goodbye from Spain. We hope you all have an awesome day no matter where you are in the world, and stay tuned for my next episode, as I'd love to have you join me. Have an awesome day, everyone. Bye. Thanks for listening to the Business and Life Conversations podcast with Angela Henderson. www.angelahenderson.com.au